Welcome to episode 171 of the Nope Coach podcast. It's about time. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg. How often have you heard that phrase? It's about time. And often it's from your loved ones or well-meaning people when you make a shift or make a change that they've been waiting for you to make for quite some time. And you finally do. And they're like, it's about time. It's about time you two got hitched. It's about time you moved out of your parents' house. It's about time you got a career. It's about time you did something about your health. It's about time you quit drinking or smoking. I'm sure at least once in your life, for everybody who's listening to this, maybe more, you've heard that it's about time from someone. And actually, how does it make you feel? Because to me, when I hear, it's about time, usually it makes me feel about shit. So what I want to chat about today is it's about timing. How often have you done something that you weren't yet ready for? And that could be any number of reasons. You weren't yet ready physically, emotionally, financially. And how has it panned out when you've tried to push through or be forced through? A few examples come to mind. So a while back, I joined Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies mentorship. He doesn't have that program anymore. And I remember saying to him in like the second month, I wish I'd found you years ago. Like, this is exactly what I needed. And I felt like I'd wasted time, speaking of it's about time, on many other things that didn't move my business forward, that didn't move the needle forward, that, were a waste of time, money, energy, all the resources. And I remember Tad saying to me at the time, I just can't, it never gets old now, that I wouldn't have been ready for him then. I needed to go through all the things that I went through in order to make the most of that mentorship. If I hadn't had experiences that weren't great, if I hadn't had things that, were suboptimal, then I wouldn't have got the value from the timing in the mentorship. And this week in my program, in Why Wait, the module that we just discussed was about resistance. And resistance is when we come up against a fear or a block. It often shows up as a self-sabotaging behavior. How often have you started to make progress? Things have been going really good. You're starting to see results. And then next thing, it seems like you're getting in your own way. And the reason I'm linking this to timing, the question I asked the Why Wait members, and this is something you guys can journal on too, when was a time when you simply weren't ready or weren't willing to move past your own resistance? When was a time when you simply weren't ready or weren't willing to move past your own resistance, either because it wasn't the right time or because you didn't have the inner development yet? And the example I gave was my book. I started writing it in 2018. It was basically the book I had always wanted to read. I'd seen so many weight loss before and afters that were, they never had a story like mine where the weight kind of went up and down and up and down. So I was like, I must be the one who needs to write it. So I began to write it in 2018. And it wasn't the right time, but I just ignored my inkling, my inner knowing, and I pushed through. I hired a book coach to motivate me and hold me accountable. I forced myself to write daily for 6 months. I did 15 minutes a day. I created deadlines that to stick to the project. But the thing is, when it all came down to it, when push came to shove, I simply wasn't ready emotionally to write that book yet. Writing a memoir is kind of like cutting open your emotional wounds and bleeding your emotions everywhere. So I parked the project. I thought I was burying it, to be honest. But I parked it. 3 years later, I picked it up and I finished it in 1 week. That's timing, folks, because I was ready. I'd done a lot of the personal development work and the emotional work, and I managed to move through it really, really quickly. And what I want you to consider listening to this is, where in your life are you trying to force yourself before you are ready? You're trying to put yourself in a situation that it honestly isn't the right time for. And how much is this encouraged by mainstream media with FOMO, fear of missing out? Join now. You may never have this opportunity again. It's never going to be this price again. You're never going to be as young as you are now. You need to make this change. What will your children benefit from this? How will future you thank you? And so on and so forth. And there is a difference between needing that little bit of nudge or encouragement to take action, because, getting out of your comfort zone is a challenge. But there's a difference between a nudge and a push or a force or a, pressing all the pain points and the buttons and saying, it's now or never. And I really want to encourage you, for anybody listening, if your inner knowing, if your instinct, if your intuition, your gut, whatever you want to call it, is honestly saying to you that now isn't the right time, don't get sucked into the scarcity fear tactic marketing ploy, because then you'll end up regretting that later. There is so much inner knowing that we've lost sight of about what is the right time and what is the difference between resistance, fear, uncertainty, and knowing it's not the right time. So one of the things I do is I go for a walk every day, call it my penny walk. I've done an episode about it. If you go and listen to it, I think it's in the 30s, episode on pennies. And the goal is 45 minutes. That's the goal of the walk. But some days I just don't have that time legitimately, or I tell myself it's too tired or it's too hot or it's too cold. So the penny, which is the minimum number, is that I walk to the mailbox, which is like 12 steps from my house. A few weeks back, I was really quite unwell, like I could barely get out of bed for 4 days in a row. So the penny for the following week was literally the mailbox. I didn't push through. I didn't extend the walk. I got nowhere near the 45 minutes. I honored my body, saying, this is all we're capable of right now. And then the following week, physically, I was recovered, but I was in resistance. I was like, oh, it's too hot. I'm too tired. I don't have time, and so on and so forth. So there's a difference between it honestly not being the right time and us falling into resistance and making excuses for our behavior. And this is where the magic lies. Being self-aware enough to know, is it legitimately not the right time? Or is it I'm scared and fearful, or I'm just feeling lazy and whatever? And only you can know the answer to that. For me, when I start making the excuses to myself that it's too hot or I'm too tired or I don't have time, they're my red flags that that's resistance. But if it's things like my body is legitimately sore, or I feel legitimately unwell, not like I've got a cold, but like this is just, there's so much awareness about, is this legitimately not the right time, or am I letting myself off the hook? And when times are tough, when life gets hard, it can be easy to let myself off the hook more and more and more and more. We're ending up on a tangent here, so I'm going to take it back to the topic of this day's episode, and that one may come up in a future one. But what I really wanted to get across to you today is, if the only reason you're doing something is because, of any sort of fear, this opportunity will never happen again, I might miss out, I'm going to force and push myself, then I really encourage you to pause and go, maybe this isn't the right time, and honor that. And conversely, when you do something like I had with my experience with Tad Hargrave, and I was like, I wish I'd found you years ago. Like, I've wasted all this time. Trusting that nothing is ever wasted. You may not get the goal that you'd hoped in the other things that you had done, but the progress you do make, even if externally it's not visible, is preparing you for the time that you will do it. Like, random example just came to mind. How many people don't pass their driver's exam on the first go? They might be the second or the third or the fifth. But every time you sit the driver's exam, every time you are practicing taking that test, you get that step closer, you learn that bit more, so that for the next time you eventually will. Another example, children learning to walk. I don't think any child pulls themselves up and walks the first time. Pull themselves up, fall over, pull themselves up, fall over, pull themselves up, take a step, fall over. But every time they're building the strength in their legs, they're building the strength in their core, they're building their balance, they're building their proprioception of the awareness of what's around them. So eventually they will walk and then run and so on. So we don't look to small children or people who haven't yet got their driver's test and say, well, you're never going to do it. And sometimes we may say it's about time. Like, it's funny, I did not walk until 18 months. I was born lazy or efficient, whichever way you want to look at it. And I'm sure when I finally toddled, my mum was like, it's about time. But I remember with my children, I was like, I'm not ready. They sure were, though. So, yeah, I hope that you take away from this today to be a bit more discerning before you jump into something and beat yourself up, trusting your inner knowing and your intuition. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you're not yet on my email list, come and join me. So it's about timing. I would love to see you. I send an email about once a week. I have some new things that are going to be coming out soon, and my email list get the first dibs and the first knowing about everything. And I send unique content that I don't share on social media or on the podcast. So head over to SuzanneCulberg.com, click on SuzanneCulberg.com, click on newsletter. It's right up there. And I'd love to join your inbox. Thanks for listening. See you on the next one. Bye for now.